If you love stories of betrayal and shocking marriage secrets, this channel is for you. Like and subscribe. The contractions were coming every 4 minutes when I finally accepted Marcus wasn't going to make it. I'd been texting him since 6 a.m., called twice, left a voicemail that tried not to sound desperate even though I was gripping the bathroom counter so hard my knuckles had gone white. Labor started. Contractions regular. Heading to hospital soon. His response came an hour later, casual as a weather update. Big meeting with investors today. Can't reschedule. You'll be fine. First babies take forever. Now it was 2 p.m., and I was alone in a hospital bed wearing a thin gown that made me feel exposed and forgotten. The monitors beeped steadily, tracking our son's heartbeat, strong and insistent, like he was already protesting his father's absence. Still no word from your husband? Nurse Helen asked, checking my IV with gentle efficiency. She'd stopped trying to hide the pity in her voice around noon. He's in an important meeting, I said automatically, the lie familiar and bitter on my tongue. Helen made a soft sound that could have been sympathy or disapproval. Well, you're at 7 centimeters now. This baby's coming whether Dad shows up or not. The matter-of-fact tone should have been comforting. Instead, it highlighted the reality I'd been avoiding for 9 months. I was going to do this alone. Another contraction seized me, and I focused on breathing through it the way we'd practiced in those birthing classes Marcus attended twice before his work schedule got too crazy. I counted seconds, gripped the bed rail, and tried not to think about all the other women in this hospital who had hands to hold and foreheads to kiss. When it passed, I reached for my phone with shaking fingers. Nothing. No texts. No missed calls. No husband racing through traffic, apologizing profusely, promising he'd be there any second now. Just silence, and the undeniable truth that I'd married a man who could miss the birth of his son for a meeting that probably could have been rescheduled with a single phone call. Sarah? Helen touched my shoulder. Your blood pressure's spiking. I need you to try to relax. Relax. As if that were possible when your entire world was contracting into a single, devastating realization. You were about to become a mother, and the man who was supposed to become a father with you simply didn't care enough to show up. Jacob entered the world at 4:47 p.m., with a cry that seemed too big for his tiny body. Dr. Patterson placed him on my chest, this perfect stranger with my nose and Marcus's dark hair, and I felt my heart crack open in ways I hadn't known were possible. He's beautiful, I whispered, counting fingers and toes through my tears. You're so beautiful. 10 perfect fingers. 10 perfect toes. Eyes squeezed shut against the bright lights. A son who would never remember that his father wasn't here for his first breath. My phone buzzed on the bedside table. Finally. Meeting's wrapping up. How's it going? How's it going? As if I'd been at a dentist appointment or grocery shopping, not bringing his child into the world. I turned the phone face down without responding, and focused entirely on Jacob, who was rooting against my chest with instinctive hunger. Let's get you weighed and measured, Helen said gently, lifting Jacob with practiced care. 7 pounds, 4 ounces, she announced moments later. 20 inches long. Perfect APGAR scores. She wrapped him in a hospital blanket and returned him to my arms. You did amazing, Sarah. I know it wasn't what you planned, but you were so strong. Strong. The word felt hollow. I didn't feel strong. I felt abandoned and angry and terrified of raising this perfect child with a man who couldn't even be bothered to witness his birth. For the birth certificate, Helen continued, her pen hovering over the clipboard. Baby's name? Jacob Richard Mitchell. Richard for my father, who'd died 2 months ago, the only man who'd never let me down. And father's information? I looked at the empty chair where Marcus should have been sitting, at my silent phone, at Jacob sleeping peacefully, already more present in his own life than his father had been. Marcus Bennett. But he's not. I stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. Not here? Not interested? Not worthy of being listed first? Helen's expression softened with understanding. It's okay. We can complete that section later if you'd prefer. She left me with forms to sign and instructions about feeding schedules. The room fell quiet except for Jacob's soft breathing and the distant sounds of hospital life, other babies crying, families celebrating, fathers who'd actually shown up. I was dozing fitfully when Helen returned, her face carrying an odd expression I couldn't quite read. Sarah, there's something I need to give you. She held a small wooden box, roughly the size of a shoebox, its surface worn smooth with age. A man dropped this off at the nurse's station 3 weeks ago. Left very specific instructions. My heart stuttered. What kind of instructions? Helen set the box on my bed carefully, like it might break. He said to give it to you only if your husband didn't show up for the delivery. The box sat on my lap, heavy with more than just physical weight. Mahogany, maybe, with brass hinges that had tarnished to a dull green. No lock, just a simple latch that looked like it hadn't been opened in years. Who brought it? I asked, my fingers tracing the smooth wood. Helen consulted her notes. A Mr. David Chen. He was very specific about the conditions. Said if your husband was present for the birth, I should keep the box sealed and return it to his office. But if you were alone, she gestured at the obvious, then it was meant for you. David Chen, my father's law partner, the man who'd delivered the eulogy at Dad's funeral, talking about integrity and protecting the people you love. Did he say anything else? Just that your father arranged everything before he passed, that you'd understand when you opened it. Helen squeezed my shoulder gently. I'll give you some privacy. After she left, I sat staring at the box for a long time. Jacob slept in the bassinet beside me, oblivious to whatever revelation waited inside this piece of polished wood. My father had died of a heart attack 8 weeks ago. Sudden, the doctor said. He'd been healthy, active, only 59. One moment grilling burgers in his backyard, the next moment gone. We'd been close, especially after my mother passed when I was 16. He'd raised me alone, taught me to change tires and negotiate salary and trust my instincts. The same instincts that had been screaming warnings about Marcus for months. Warnings I'd ignored because I wanted so desperately to believe I hadn't made a terrible mistake. With trembling hands, I opened the latch. Inside, nestled in navy velvet, was a sealed envelope with my name written in my father's precise handwriting. Beneath it, a USB drive, and underneath that, a single photograph that made my breath catch. It was me at 6 months pregnant, leaving my last doctor's appointment. I remembered that day. Marcus had promised to come but canceled at the last minute. Some emergency at work that couldn't wait. But I wasn't alone in the photo. Marcus was there too, clearly visible in the background. Not at work, not in an emergency meeting. Standing outside a coffee shop across the street, his arm around a blonde woman I'd never seen before, both of them laughing. The timestamp in the corner read 2:47 p.m., the exact time he'd texted me, stuck in conference room. So sorry, can't get away. I stared at the photo until my vision blurred, my father's voice echoing in my memory from a conversation we'd had 3 months before he died. Sarah, sweetheart, are you happy? Of course, Dad. Why wouldn't I be? You tell me. I'd changed the subject, smiled too brightly, insisted everything was fine. But he'd known. Somehow he'd known. With shaking hands, I reached for the envelope and broke the seal. My dearest Sarah, if you're reading this letter, then my worst fear has come true. You've just given birth to my grandson, and Marcus wasn't there. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you from this moment. But I can protect you from what comes next. The paper trembled in my hands. My father's handwriting blurred through tears I couldn't stop. 6 months ago, I hired a private investigator. Not because I wanted to invade your privacy, sweetheart, but because I saw something in Marcus that reminded me of the men I've dealt with in court for 30 years. The ones who charm their way into good women's lives, and then slowly, methodically, destroy them from the inside. I prayed I was wrong. I prayed the investigator would come back with nothing. He didn't. I looked at the photograph again. Marcus and the blonde woman. The lie about the conference room. The USB drive contains 6 months of documentation. I won't list everything here. You'll see it all when you're ready. But I need you to understand the basics. Marcus has been planning to leave you since the day you announced your pregnancy. The words hit like a physical blow. I had to stop reading, press my hand against my mouth to keep from making a sound that would wake Jacob. He's been preparing, Sarah. Opening separate bank accounts, moving money you don't know about, consulting divorce attorneys about how to minimize child support obligations, meeting with his mother about custody strategies. The woman in the photograph is Amanda Pierce, his colleague from work. They've been involved for 14 months, 4 months before you even got pregnant. I thought back to our anniversary dinner last year, how distracted Marcus had been, how he checked his phone every 5 minutes and then accused me of being paranoid when I asked if everything was okay. That was when it started. While I was planning our future, he was planning his exit. I know this hurts. I know you want to believe I'm wrong, that there's some explanation. There isn't. But Sarah, I didn't document his betrayal just to break your heart. I did it to protect you. Everything on that USB drive has been organized by my law partner, David Chen. Time-stamped, verified, legally admissible. When Marcus eventually shows his true colors, and he will, sweetheart, probably very soon, you'll have everything you need to protect yourself and Jacob. There's more in the box. Documents I've prepared, resources I've set aside. But first, you need to see the truth. Watch the USB drive. All of it. I know it will hurt, but you need to understand what you're dealing with. Then read the blue folder at the bottom of the box. I love you. I'm proud of you. And I promise you, this betrayal won't destroy you. It will free you. Dad. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely set the letter down. Jacob stirred in his bassinet, making small noises, and I lifted him automatically, holding him against my chest while my world fell apart. 6 months of investigation. 6 months of my father watching my marriage crumble while I smiled and pretended everything was fine. He'd known, and he'd protected me the only way he could. I couldn't look at the USB drive yet, not while holding Jacob, not while my hands were still shaking and my mind was spinning with the implications of my father's letter. Instead, I reached deeper into the box and found the blue folder he'd mentioned. Inside were documents, legal documents, and a smaller note clipped to the front. Sarah, these are emergency measures. Use them if you need them. Use them when you're ready. But know that you have options now. You're not trapped. Dad. The first document was a property deed. I read it 3 times before the words made sense. 428 Riverside Lane. Sole owner, Sarah Coleman Mitchell. That was my name. My maiden name legally hyphenated with my married name. But I'd never heard of this address. Attached was a photo of a craftsman-style house with a wide front porch and a garden that looked professionally maintained. Beautiful. Move-in ready. In a neighborhood I'd looked at wistfully when Marcus and I were house hunting, before he'd insisted we needed something more practical. Market value listed, $1.2 million. Mortgage balance, $0. I stared at the numbers. My father had bought me a house, a paid-off house worth over $1 million, and put it solely in my name. Purchased 18 months ago, a note explained. Before your marriage. Legally classified as separate property under California law. Marcus has no claim to it, regardless of divorce proceedings. The second document showed a bank account at Pacific Trust. Account holder, Sarah Coleman Mitchell. Balance, $380,000. This money came from my personal savings, set aside over the years. It became active the day Jacob was born. It's yours. All yours. Marcus doesn't know it exists. $380,000. Enough to live on for years. Enough to hire the best lawyers. Enough to never have to ask Marcus for anything. The third document was different. A trust fund established in Jacob's name. Beneficiary amount, $200,000. Accessible when he turned 18. He'll never want for college or opportunities, my father had written. And neither will you. I couldn't breathe. The magnitude of what my father had done, the planning, the foresight, the quiet protection he'd built around me without ever saying a word, was overwhelming. He'd known Marcus would abandon me. He'd known I'd need a way out. So he'd built one, piece by careful piece, and hidden it until the exact moment I needed it most. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Meeting finally done. On my way. Be there in 20. I looked at the message, at the documents spread across my bed, at Jacob sleeping peacefully, unaware that his father was about to walk into a very different situation than he expected. 20 minutes. I had 20 minutes to decide how much Marcus needed to know. I reached for the USB drive. Some truths couldn't wait. The hospital room had a small television with a USB port. My hands shook as I connected the drive, keeping the volume low so I wouldn't wake Jacob. The screen filled with a folder structure organized by date. 6 months of surveillance, just like my father had said. I clicked on the most recent file, dated 3 days ago. Video footage. Marcus leaving our house at 7 a.m., just like always. But instead of driving to his office downtown, he headed east, pulling into the parking lot of an upscale apartment complex I'd never seen before. The timestamp showed him entering at 7:23 a.m. He didn't emerge until 9:47 a.m. When he did, the blonde woman from the earlier photo was with him. Amanda. She kissed him goodbye at his car, casual and familiar, like they'd done this 1,000 times. I clicked on another file. This one showed them at a restaurant, holding hands across the table. The timestamp, 2 weeks ago. The same night Marcus told me he had to work late on a presentation. Another file. Marcus and Amanda entering a jewelry store. The date, 3 weeks before my due date. He emerged carrying a small bag, the exact size that holds ring boxes. He'd bought her jewelry while I was home organizing Jacob's nursery alone. I forced myself to keep watching. File after file of a double life I'd been too naive or too pregnant or too tired to notice. Then I found the audio files. The first was labeled Bennett Family Dinner, October 8th. I recognized the date. Marcus had gone to his mother's house for Sunday dinner, said I should rest instead of coming, that pregnant women needed their sleep. I'd been grateful for the consideration. Now I understood why he didn't want me there. She's getting more demanding every day. Marcus's voice came through tinny but clear. Wants me to go to every appointment, read pregnancy books, take those ridiculous birthing classes. You're being too accommodating, his mother Victoria replied. You need to establish boundaries now, before the baby comes and she thinks you'll just drop everything for her. I've been pulling back, missing appointments, making sure she understands I have priorities. Good. Women like Sarah need to learn they're not the center of the universe. Women like Sarah, as if I were a type, not a person, not his wife carrying his child. What about after the birth? That was Sophia, Marcus's sister. You're not seriously planning to stay, are you? 6 months, Marcus said. My lawyer says that's the sweet spot. Long enough to look committed for custody purposes, short enough that I'm not on the hook for extended spousal support. And Amanda's okay waiting? She's been patient this long. What's 6 more months? I stopped the recording, my stomach churning. They'd been planning this like a business transaction. My pregnancy, Jacob's birth, our marriage, all just obstacles to manage on Marcus's timeline. The next file was labeled Attorney Consultation, November 15th. I clicked play, even though part of me wanted to throw the drive against the wall and pretend I'd never seen any of this. Mr. Bennett, let me be clear, an unfamiliar male voice began. California is a no-fault divorce state, but custody is determined by the child's best interests. The fact that you're establishing separate residence before the birth could be viewed unfavorably. That's why I'm waiting, Marcus replied. I'll play the devoted father for a few months. Diaper changes, midnight feedings, the whole performance. Then when I file, I'll cite irreconcilable differences. She's too emotional, too demanding, can't handle the stress of motherhood. I'll have documentation. And you're certain she won't contest? Sarah? No. She'll cry and blame herself and eventually agree to whatever seems fair. That's who she is. Conflict avoidant to a fault. Conflict avoidant. He'd weaponized my kindness, my desire to keep the peace, my trust in him. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, quick, male. Marcus was here. I ejected the USB drive and slipped it back into the wooden box, closing the lid just as the door swung open. Marcus filled the doorway, slightly out of breath, his tie loosened, and his expression somewhere between apologetic and defensive. In his hands, a bouquet of grocery store roses that looked hastily grabbed. Sarah. He crossed to the bed in 3 strides, setting the flowers on the bedside table. I'm so sorry. The meeting ran long and then traffic was insane and... It's fine, I said, my voice flat. He stopped mid-excuse, thrown by my lack of emotion. He'd probably expected tears, accusations. The conflict he knew I'd avoid. Is he... Marcus's eyes moved to the bassinet. Jacob. His name is Jacob. Jacob, Marcus repeated, like he was testing out the word. That's nice. Can I hold him? I wanted to say no. Wanted to ask him where he'd been for the past 14 hours. Wanted to throw the USB drive at his head and demand explanations for Amanda and the jewelry store and the attorney consultation. But I heard my father's voice in my head. When you're ready. Use them when you're ready. I wasn't ready yet. Not while I was still processing. Not while my body ached from labor, and my mind reeled from revelation. He's sleeping, I said instead. You shouldn't wake him. Marcus nodded, hovering awkwardly beside the bassinet, staring at his son like he was a museum exhibit behind glass. He's smaller than I expected. 7 pounds 4 ounces. That's good? Is that good? It's average. The conversation felt stilted, mechanical. We were strangers making small talk over a baby that should have been bonding us together, but instead highlighted every crack in our foundation. How are you feeling? Marcus asked, still not looking at me. Tired. Right, of course. Labor is exhausting. My mom said her labor with me was 23 hours. Can you imagine? I could imagine, actually. Could imagine going through that alone while my husband prioritized investor meetings and secret girlfriends. Did everything go okay? No complications? Everything was fine. Good. That's good. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture I recognized as nervous energy. I really am sorry I couldn't be here. Peterson was adamant about presenting today, and you know how he is. Marcus. I cut him off, my voice sharp enough that he finally met my eyes. There was no Peterson meeting. Silence. Heavy and dangerous. What are you talking about? Your calendar. I lied smoothly, thinking fast. I checked it this morning when you weren't answering your phone. The Peterson meeting was scheduled for tomorrow, not today. I watched him recalibrate, his face cycling through surprise, calculation, and then careful concern. You must have seen an old version. We moved it up at the last minute. Emergency request from their CFO. The lie came so easily, so practiced. How many times had he done this? How many excuses had I accepted without question? Did you at least close the deal? I asked, my tone neutral. Actually, yeah. Yeah, we did. Big win for the company. He smiled, the expression not quite reaching his eyes. It'll mean a nice bonus. We can use that for Jacob's expenses. We. As if there still was a we. As if he hadn't spent 6 months planning his exit strategy. Jacob stirred in his bassinet, making small mewing sounds. Marcus reached for him instinctively, but I was faster. I've got him, I said, lifting my son and cradling him against my chest. He's probably hungry. Marcus stepped back, uncertain. Do you need anything? Water? Food? I'm fine. Right. Another awkward pause. I should probably let you rest. I'll come back tomorrow. Bring you some real food. Hospital food is terrible. Sure. He hesitated at the door, looking back at me and Jacob. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Guilt, maybe, or regret. But it vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. I really am glad everything went okay, he said quietly. I know I should have been here. I'll make it up to you. After he left, I sat in the dimness holding Jacob, listening to his soft breathing, feeling the weight of the wooden box on the bedside table. Marcus thought he knew me. Conflict avoidant, emotional, easy to manipulate. He was about to learn how wrong he was. But first, I needed to see what else my father had left me. I reached for the box again. There were still more documents inside, and something told me the real revelations were yet to come. After Marcus left, I fed Jacob and waited until he fell back asleep before returning to the wooden box. There was one folder I hadn't opened yet, a thin manila envelope marked with a single word in my father's handwriting. Evidence. Inside were printed transcripts. Text message exchanges. The first set made my blood run cold. Text thread. Marcus Bennett and Victoria Bennett. Date. 2 weeks before my due date. Victoria. Have you talked to the attorney about custody percentages? Marcus. He says 50-50 is standard, but we can push for primary if we document concerns about her mental state. Victoria. I've been keeping notes. Her emotional outbursts, the crying, how withdrawn she's become. Marcus. Perfect. Keep documenting. The more evidence of instability, the better our case. I had to stop reading. Those emotional outbursts were normal pregnancy hormones. The crying was from loneliness, because my husband had systematically isolated me. The withdrawal was depression from being abandoned by everyone who was supposed to support me, and they'd been weaponizing it, documenting my pain as evidence to take my child. The next transcript was worse. Text thread. Marcus Bennett and Amanda Pierce. Date. 1 month ago. Amanda. I saw a crib at Pottery Barn today. Couldn't help thinking about our future. Marcus. Soon. Just a few more months of this charade. Amanda. I hate that she gets to have your baby when I'm the one who actually wants to be with you. Marcus. You'll get your chance. Once the divorce is final, we can start our real life. Maybe even have one of our own. Amanda. Promise? Marcus. I promise. This is temporary. She's temporary. I was temporary. My marriage was a charade. And Marcus was making promises to another woman about a future that included children, just not the child he'd already fathered. The evidence folder contained dozens more exchanges. Marcus discussing custody strategies with his mother. Marcus reassuring Amanda that I meant nothing. Marcus calculating exactly how much child support he could minimize if he played his cards right. But the final document in the folder was different. A notarized statement from someone named Dr. Patricia Morrison, a psychiatrist I'd never heard of. At the request of Richard Coleman, I have reviewed 6 months of documented behavior patterns, text communications, and recorded conversations involving Marcus Bennett and his family members regarding Sarah Mitchell. Based on this evidence, I find clear patterns of emotional manipulation, systematic isolation of the victim, coordinated gaslighting, and premeditated planning to use fabricated mental health concerns in anticipated custody proceedings. In my professional opinion, These behaviors constitute psychological abuse. The subject's pregnancy was deliberately used as a vulnerability point to establish control and create documentation that could later be used against her. I would characterize this as calculated and malicious. The victim should be advised to seek immediate legal protection. My hands trembled as I set down the statement. My father had thought of everything, not just documenting Marcus's infidelity, but having a mental health professional evaluate the abuse for what it was. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't unstable. I was being systematically destroyed by people I'd trusted. The last item in the wooden box was a business card clipped to a handwritten note. David Chen, Family Law Attorney Coleman and Partners. Sarah, David has all the evidence. He's been briefed on everything and is prepared to file for emergency custody protection if needed. He's also prepared divorce paperwork with terms heavily in your favor, ready to file the moment you give the word. You don't have to use any of this, but you should know it exists. The house, the money, the evidence, it's all yours. It's all protection. Use it if you need it. Ignore it if you don't. But please, sweetheart, don't let kindness make you vulnerable to people who would use it against you. Your father loved you enough to prepare for the worst, while hoping for the best. Now it's your choice what happens next. David Chen. I looked at Jacob sleeping peacefully in his bassinet, at the hospital room that had witnessed his birth without his father present, at the wooden box that contained evidence of betrayal so thorough, so calculated, that it still didn't feel entirely real. Marcus thought he had a plan. 6 months of playing devoted father, then a clean exit with minimal obligations. But he didn't know that my father had outplayed him 6 months ago. The question was, what did I want to do with that advantage? My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Home safe. Get some rest. I'll bring breakfast tomorrow. Love you. Love you. 2 words he'd texted to Amanda just last week, probably while sitting in our living room. I looked at the business card in my hand, then at my sleeping son, then at the door through which Marcus had walked, confident in his deception. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on David Chen's card. He answered on the second ring. Sarah, he said gently, your father told me you'd call when you were ready. I'm ready, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I need to know my options. Then let's talk about protecting you and Jacob. Tell me, has Marcus done or said anything since the birth that concerns you? I thought about his lies, his performance, the way he'd looked at our son like an obligation instead of a miracle. He missed the birth, I said quietly. And then he lied about why. That's a start, David said. Now let me tell you what we can do about it. David Chen arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later, carrying a leather briefcase and an expression of calm competence that reminded me so much of my father. I almost cried. I'm sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, he said, settling into the visitor's chair. Your father was one of the best men I've ever known. He spent his last months making sure you'd be protected. He knew, I said. Not a question. He knew everything. He suspected first, then he confirmed. David opened his briefcase, pulling out a thick folder. Richard came to me 7 months ago, said his gut was telling him something was wrong with your marriage, but he needed facts before he could act. That's when he hired Torres, the investigator. Yes, former FBI, specializes in domestic cases. He's very good at staying invisible. David paused, his expression softening. Your father didn't want to invade your privacy, Sarah, but he also couldn't stand by and watch you walk into a trap. Jacob stirred in his bassinet, and I lifted him automatically, needing the comfort of his weight against my chest. What happens now? I asked. That depends on what you want. David pulled out a legal pad. I've prepared several options, ranging from minimal intervention to full legal protection. But I need to understand your goals first. I want Jacob safe. I want to make sure Marcus can't. I struggled to find the words. He's planning to use my emotions against me. Document everything I do wrong so he can take custody. He won't succeed, David said firmly. We have 6 months of evidence proving his plan was premeditated. Any judge would see through it. But we can do better than just defending. We can establish clear boundaries now, before he has a chance to build his false narrative. He laid out several documents on the bedside table. Option 1. File for legal separation immediately. Establish temporary custody arrangements that favor you as primary parent, with supervised visitation for Marcus until permanent orders are in place. Would that look bad? Like I'm being vindictive? Not when we present the evidence of his affair, his financial deception, and his documented plans to manipulate the custody process. We're not being vindictive, we're being protective. He pulled out another document. Option 2. We wait. Let Marcus think he's in control. Meanwhile, we file everything with the court under seal. The evidence, the custody concerns, the financial documentation. If he files first, we're ready to counter immediately with proof of his bad faith. What would my father have wanted me to do? David smiled sadly. He said you'd ask that. His exact words were, "Tell her I want her to choose what makes her feel safest, not what makes other people comfortable." That sounded like Dad, always pushing me to prioritize my own well-being over keeping the peace. "There's one more thing," David said, pulling out a final document. "The house on Riverside Lane. It's ready for you to move into immediately. Fully furnished, utilities connected. Your father spent the last year preparing it. He really thought of everything. He loved you. And he knew that women in your position often stay in bad situations because they don't have the resources to leave. He made sure you'd never have that excuse." I looked down at Jacob, thinking about raising him in that beautiful house my father had chosen. A fresh start, away from the home I'd shared with Marcus and his lies. When could I move in? "Tomorrow if you want. I have the keys in my briefcase." Tomorrow. I'd leave the hospital with my newborn son and go directly to a new life. No confrontation with Marcus. No dramatic scene. Just a quiet exit while he was still playing his game, unaware that I'd already won. "What about my things? At the house Marcus and I rent?" David's expression turned slightly calculating. "That's actually the beautiful part. The house you're currently living in? Your father owns it. He's been your landlord for the past 2 years. Marcus has been paying rent to a property management company that funnels everything into a trust in your name." I stared at him. "Marcus doesn't know? No one knows except your father, me, and now you. The lease is in Marcus's name only, which means you can legally remove yourself and Jacob at any time, and he has no grounds to stop you. And if he tries to follow us to the new house, then we file for a restraining order based on concerns about his documented behavior. We already have the paperwork drafted." David met my eyes seriously. "Sarah, your father built you an entire escape route. The question is whether you're ready to use it." I thought about Marcus's text, "Love you." Words that meant nothing. Words he'd used on Amanda while planning to leave me. I thought about Victoria documenting my instability, about the attorney consultation discussing how to manipulate custody, about 6 months of betrayal while I'd been alone and pregnant and trusting. "I'm ready," I said. "Tell me what I need to do." David smiled, pulling out a fresh legal pad. "First, we establish that you're moving for your safety and Jacob's well-being, not out of spite. Second, we document everything. His absence from the birth, his lies about his whereabouts, his lack of involvement in Jacob's first hours. As David outlined the strategy, I felt something shift inside me. Not anger exactly, not revenge, just clarity. Marcus had made his choices. Now I was making mine. And mine came with my father's protection, a house he'd never see coming, and evidence he couldn't explain away. The nurse discharged us the next morning. Marcus had texted 3 times, saying he'd pick us up, bring the car seat, help us get settled at home. I'd responded simply, "Already arranged. See you soon." David was waiting in the hospital lobby with a car seat already installed in his Mercedes. No fanfare, no dramatic exit, just a quiet departure while Marcus sat in traffic, unaware that his wife and son were heading to a house he'd never heard of. The house on Riverside Lane was everything the photos had promised. Craftsman style with a wraparound porch, hardwood floors that gleamed in the afternoon sun, and a nursery that made my breath catch. Pale blue walls, a white crib, a rocking chair positioned perfectly near the window. My father had chosen everything, down to the books on the shelves and the soft blankets folded in the dresser. He picked out every detail himself, David said quietly, watching me take it in. Spent weekends here, making sure it would feel like home. I pressed my hand over my mouth, overwhelmed. He'd been dying, though none of us knew it yet, and he'd spent his last months building me a sanctuary. "Take your time settling in," David said, handing me the keys. "I'll file the separation paperwork tomorrow. We'll serve Marcus at his office, keep everything professional. What will he do? Probably try to negotiate, offer counseling, promise to change, suggest we're being hasty." David's expression hardened slightly. Men like Marcus always think they can talk their way out of consequences. After David left, I spent the afternoon exploring my new home with Jacob in my arms. Every room held some touch of my father, his favorite coffee mugs in the kitchen, photographs of us throughout my childhood on the mantle, a note tucked into the nursery drawer. "Sarah, if you're reading this, you've made the brave choice. I'm proud of you. Jacob is lucky to have a mother who's strong enough to protect him. Love always, Dad. My phone started buzzing around 6 p.m. Marcus, calling repeatedly. I let it go to voicemail, listening later to his progression from confused to concerned to angry. The texts that followed were worse. Accusations, demands, threats to call the police. I responded once. Jacob and I are safe. You'll be served with paperwork tomorrow. All communication should go through my attorney, David Chen. My phone rang immediately. I turned it off. 1 week later, the custody hearing. The family court building felt oppressive, all fluorescent lights and beige walls. I sat beside David in the courtroom, Jacob sleeping peacefully in his carrier, while Marcus and his attorney occupied the opposite table. Marcus had brought Victoria. She sat in the gallery behind him, her expression a carefully composed mask of concern, playing the worried grandmother for the judge. All rise, the bailiff announced. Judge Catherine Morrison entered, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes, and an expression that suggested she'd seen every manipulation tactic in the book. This is a preliminary custody hearing for Jacob Richard Mitchell, she began, reviewing her notes. Mr. Bennett has requested joint legal and physical custody. Ms. Mitchell is seeking primary custody with supervised visitation. Mr. Chen, you may present your case. David stood, his voice calm and professional. Your Honor, we have substantial evidence that Mr. Bennett engaged in systematic deception and manipulation throughout Ms. Mitchell's pregnancy, culminating in his deliberate absence from his son's birth. Marcus's attorney, a polished woman named Karen Rhodes, immediately objected. Your Honor, Mr. Bennett was attending a crucial business meeting. His absence was unavoidable, not deliberate. Perhaps we should let the evidence speak, Judge Morrison said. Mr. Chen? David activated the courtroom's display screen. The first image appeared. Marcus and Amanda entering his apartment, time-stamped 7:23 a.m. on the day of Jacob's birth. Marcus went pale. This photograph was taken the morning Ms. Mitchell went into labor, David explained. Mr. Bennett claimed to be in an emergency investor meeting. Instead, he was with his colleague, Amanda Pierce, at the apartment he'd been secretly maintaining for over a year. Karen leaned over to whisper urgently to Marcus, but David was already advancing to the next exhibit. Text messages between Mr. Bennett and Ms. Pierce. David read from the transcript. Can't wait for this to be over so we can start our real life. Sent 2 weeks before Jacob's due date. Judge Morrison's expression grew colder with each revelation. Audio recordings from family dinners where Mr. Bennett and his mother, Victoria Bennett, discussed strategies for documenting Ms. Mitchell's alleged instability to use in custody proceedings. David played a 30-second clip. Victoria's voice filled the courtroom. Keep documenting her emotional outbursts. The more evidence of instability, the better our case. I watched Victoria's face drain of color. She'd been sitting confidently behind Marcus, ready to testify about my supposed unfitness. Now her own words condemned her. Finally, Your Honor, a consultation with a divorce attorney where Mr. Bennett explicitly stated his plan to play the devoted father for 6 months before filing, specifically to look better for custody purposes. Marcus's voice came through the speakers. She's too conflict avoidant. She'll cry and eventually agree to whatever seems fair. Judge Morrison stopped David with a raised hand. I've heard enough. Ms. Rhodes, does your client have any explanation for this evidence? Karen whispered with Marcus for several moments. His face had gone from pale to red, his jaw clenched. Your Honor, Karen began carefully, relationships are complicated. My client admits he made mistakes during a stressful time. Mistakes? Judge Morrison's voice cut like ice. Counselor, I've been on the bench for 23 years. What I'm seeing isn't mistakes. It's calculated manipulation of both Ms. Mitchell and this court system. She turned to Marcus directly. Mr. Bennett, you deliberately missed your son's birth to be with your affair partner. You conspired with family members to create false documentation of mental instability. You consulted attorneys about gaming the custody system before your child was even born. Is there anything in this evidence that's factually incorrect? Marcus's attorney touched his arm, warning him not to speak, but his silence was answer enough. Judge Morrison's ruling was swift and decisive. Primary physical and legal custody to Ms. Mitchell. Mr. Bennett will have supervised visitation, 4 hours every Saturday at a court-approved facility. No overnight visits until Mr. Bennett completes a co-parenting course and demonstrates 6 months of consistent, appropriate engagement. Your Honor, that's extremely restrictive, Karen began. It's appropriate, given the evidence of manipulation and deception. This court's priority is the child's welfare, not the father's convenience. Judge Morrison's gaze moved to Victoria in the gallery. And I'm formally noting Mrs. Victoria Bennett's participation in the conspiracy to manufacture evidence. Should she attempt to seek grandparent visitation rights, this recording will be entered as evidence of her unsuitability. Victoria stood abruptly and left the courtroom, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. Judge Morrison returned her attention to Marcus. Mr. Bennett, you have an opportunity here to become the father your son deserves. I suggest you take it seriously. Court adjourned. As the bailiff announced adjournment, Marcus finally looked at me directly, not with charm or manipulation, just hollow recognition that he'd lost. Sarah, he started. All communication through attorneys, David said firmly, positioning himself between us. That's what the court ordered. We left Marcus standing at the defendant's table, his expensive attorney packing her briefcase with tight, efficient movements that suggested she wanted to be anywhere else. 3 days later, Victoria's consequences. The certified letter arrived at Victoria's home on Thursday morning. I never saw it, but David told me about it later with grim satisfaction. It was from her employer, a prestigious consulting firm where she'd worked for 15 years. The audio recording from the custody hearing had been sent anonymously to their ethics board. A company that prided itself on integrity couldn't employ someone who'd been caught on court record conspiring to manufacture false mental health evidence. She was given the option to resign quietly or face termination. She resigned. Marcus told his attorney that Victoria blamed me. David told my attorney that I should document any contact she attempted. She never did. Losing her career apparently taught her that some battles aren't worth fighting. That same week, Amanda's unraveling. Amanda Pierce learned about the custody hearing the way most people learn uncomfortable truths in the digital age, through screenshots shared by someone who'd been in the courtroom. The text exchanges, the timeline of deception, her voice on recordings discussing our future while Marcus's wife was 9 months pregnant. Someone at their company saw the documents. By Monday morning, Human Resources had launched an ethics investigation into her relationship with a married colleague. By Friday, she'd been transferred to a different department, a lateral move that everyone understood was really a demotion, away from Marcus, away from the projects she'd been leading, into a role where she could do minimal damage to the company's reputation. Marcus told his attorney that Amanda stopped taking his calls. When he showed up at her apartment, she told him through the door that she didn't date men with complicated situations. Apparently, supervised visitation and child support obligations qualified as too complicated. David relayed this information to me during a check-in call, his tone carefully neutral. I thought you should know. The consequences are extending beyond just Marcus. I felt nothing hearing about Amanda's career troubles or Victoria's resignation. No satisfaction, no vindication. Just a quiet recognition that actions have consequences. And sometimes those consequences arrive without any effort on my part. 6 months later, Jacob sits in his high chair, smearing applesauce across his tray with focused concentration. 6 months old now, with his father's dark hair and my father's knowing eyes. Marcus sees him every Saturday, exactly as ordered. He's polite during exchanges. Professional. He completed the co-parenting course and submitted the certificate to the court. The charm has been replaced by careful distance, as if he's finally realized that his manipulation won't work anymore. He brings appropriate gifts now, developmental toys instead of expensive items meant to impress. He asks about Jacob's milestones. He's learning to be a father, slowly, under supervision. I don't know if it's genuine or just another performance, but it doesn't matter. Jacob is safe, the court is watching, and Marcus knows that any misstep will be documented. Victoria hasn't attempted contact. According to mutual acquaintances, she moved to Arizona to stay with her sister, started over somewhere her recorded words wouldn't follow her. Amanda is still at the company, still in her diminished role. I saw her once, accidentally, in the grocery store parking lot. She looked at me across the rows of cars, her face a mixture of shame and something else I couldn't quite read. I didn't acknowledge her, just loaded Jacob into his car seat and drove away. The wooden box sits on my dresser, a reminder of protection that reached beyond death. Sometimes I open it and read my father's letter, remembering his voice, his wisdom, his absolute certainty that I deserved better. He was right. Jacob deserves a mother who's strong enough to protect him, who chooses safety over comfort, who understands that sometimes love means drawing boundaries, not erasing them. and I deserve a life built on truth, not lies dressed up as love. The house on Riverside Lane is ours, mine and Jacob's. Every room holds memories we're building together. First smiles, first laughs, first steps that will come soon enough. Marcus missed the birth, but in missing it, he revealed exactly who he was. And my father, in preparing for that exact possibility, gave me everything I needed to build a life without him. The box the nurse gave me wasn't just evidence, it was freedom. And sometimes, freedom is the best revenge, even when you're not seeking it. Thank you for watching until the end. Your support is very important. Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.